From the National Christian Foundation in San Diego, I'm Kim Moeller, and this is the Generous Girl Podcast, a show that shares inspirational stories about generosity through faith, family, finances, fitness, and friendships, as well as deep thoughts about what matters most and practical tips. My guests are all amazing women who have overcome adversity and are big believers in hope and in maximizing their time, their talents, and their treasures, and making their lives count. So we're so happy that you're here. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Hello, and welcome to the Generous Girl Podcast. I'm Kim Moeller, your host, and I'm thrilled to be here today with my amazing guest, Julie Baumgardner. And Julie is the Senior Director of Winshape Marriage. She will have a lot to share with you about this role because I do feel it's incredibly specifically designed for Julie and her talents and her history of, just her journey of life that's brought you to this role, Julie. But it's just always a joy to be with various women from across the country and spotlight people's stories. And today, the two areas that I think it would be fabulous for our listeners to hear about from you are the areas of faith and family, because of how Windshape Marriage focuses obviously on the family and on people's marriages. So what I like to begin with on these podcasts is a little bit about your background, so people understand where you're from, where'd you grow up, how many kids do you have now, and you take it from there. But it's great to have you.
Thank you so much. I am honored to be here. I was born in Houston, Texas, and when I turned 9, my family was moving to Tennessee. But they say once a Texan, always a Texan. So I claim Texas, but grew up in Tennessee, went to school in Kentucky, came back to Tennessee to get my graduate degree, and eventually got to Chattanooga, where comically, I actually said I would never live because I thought it was a really trashy city. And at that time, it kind of was. But moved there in 1987, and shortly thereafter met my husband. And we have been married 40 years this year. We have one. Yeah, thank you. We have one daughter, Ashley. She just turned 30, and she lives in Arkansas. So we've had a really full life. I ran a nonprofit for a long time based out of Chattanooga, and I moved in 2021. I had no idea I was going to do this, but ended up getting a new assignment from the Lord and moved to the Senior Director of Marriage position at Winshape in January of 2021. So we're having a good time.
Well, and you're doing an excellent job at the role. I'm in San Diego today, and I mention Windshape to people out here on the West Coast, and so many people have not heard of it. And I feel like it is one of the best kept secrets out here. And I encourage people, I know it means a flight to Atlanta and an hour and a half drive, but it's so worth it. So
it's worth it.
Yes. So take a minute and explain to people, what is Winshape? Who sponsors it? And what is this incredible Winshape Retreat Center all about?
Windshape Marriage is part of the Windshape Foundation, which was founded by Truett Cathy, the founder of Chick-fil-A. He started the foundation in the early 80s, and originally the ministry was the Windshape College ministry because he felt it was so important for young people to have the opportunity to get an education. And so people who worked for him, he would scholarship them. They would be a student at Berry and also participate in the college program, which is a leadership and discipleship program right alongside their college studies.
Amazing.
That was the first ministry. And then Windshape Camps came along next. So boys and girls camp, both residential and day camps across the country. Windshape Homes followed shortly thereafter. Mr. Cathy felt like it was very important for every child that they deserved the chance to grow up in a home that was safe and stable. And if that wasn't their own home, then he wanted to try and provide a place. So group homes were started in Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and they are still going today. But in addition to the group homes, they also train couples to be foster parents. And then we started Winshape Teams, which is a leadership development experience for companies, and they go literally all over the world training leaders, developing leaders. Windshape Marriage started in 2003. The space that we are in was originally a dairy farm. And the Berry College campus is very large. It's 27,000 acres. They made the decision to move the Berry up to the front of campus, and Mr. Cathy was asked if he would like the opportunity to do something with what was then the dairy. If you look at it today, you would be shocked to know that that's what it was. But there's pictures all around showing you that indeed where people stay was the barn for cows and all. It's just an amazing place. So we provide retreats for every season of life when it comes to marriage, whether you are just starting out and you are preparing for marriage, or you are a newlywed, or you are dealing with young people in your home and trying to figure out how do we keep our marriage healthy and parent these folks who are running 90 miles an hour, and then empty nest success. We also have intensives and just some amazing experiences. We're sequestered. So we're at the very back of the 27,000 acres. Mm-hmm. So it's a place for people to exhale and have the opportunity to grow closer to the Lord and closer to each other. And I love that a lot.
Oh, it is such a place to exhale. I remember driving through the gate for the very first time and just seeing hundreds of deer on the property. And then because they own thousands of acres there, you just keep driving and you feel like you are almost in another world. And then I remember hearing about the Cathy's also living, Bubba and Cindy living in Normandy, France. And so having the influence of this center, having some French antiques. And, you know, it's when people hear retreat center, please don't think like Girl Scout retreat center or, you know, like, I don't know, Parent Trap, because it's not. It's more like drive up and somebody meets you at your car. Oh, it's my pleasure. Let me take your luggage to your room. And then in the main, you know, dining room, it's not just the plastic pitchers. It's beautiful copper pitchers with French armoires. And I love the whole, just A to Z of the entire center.
Yes, it is. I've actually had people say to me, I wasn't sure what we were coming to. I thought it might be a cabin in the woods. This is definitely not a rundown cabin in the woods. And I smile and say, you are correct about that.
Yes. And I feel like the different times that I've been able to be there, I think you have done such a great job, and you work together closely with David, and just you try to just definitely exceed people's expectations and do a phenomenal job at it, so that it's very much, you know, like you're being at a, you know, 5-star resort that's a Christian retreat center, and the blend of both is just a very beautiful experience. So anyways, that's what you're currently doing. And hopefully the listeners will get a chance to come and visit and sign up for the retreats. I know they sign up very quickly because they are so popular. But let's talk about, as we're on this podcast, as we talk about how generosity is woven through family and through faith. Before this show started, you and I were talking a little bit about your learnings when you first got married, because I always do like to spotlight overcoming adversity, as we all have challenges and we all have hills and valleys. And I think that's a really great story to just unpack a little bit, as people understand like how your financial situation immediately had an impact on your marriage and then ultimately on your giving. So why don't you share a little bit about that?
I'd be glad to. I met my husband. I had gone to graduate school and had been on this journey. But to back up a little bit, when I was 18, my parents divorced. And that was very traumatic for me. Yes. I ended up putting myself through college. So lots of student loan debt, like to the tune of probably $60,000 plus of student loan debt. And I was in the process of paying that off. I had been in school a few years, but I met my husband. And while I wouldn't tell you that I'm a super big spender, I definitely came to the relationship with a fair amount of debt, and Jay was debt free and a saver.
Right.
A saver. And so we had to have some discussions just about what this meant because I didn't want to feel guilt about, I knew I had done what I needed to do to make sure that I could fulfill a calling that I felt like the Lord had on my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just actually created a plan to pay the debt off as quickly as possible. But I think one of the most pivotal discussions we had was around tithing. Jay felt very strongly about tithing no matter what. And it wasn't that I didn't feel strongly about tithing. I think I just had more of a scarcity mindset. And when we had that specific discussion, we both agreed that yes, we were going to be intentional about paying off the debt. However, we were going to tithe.
Mm-hmm.
And we started that our first year of marriage. And we still do that today because the discussion went along the lines of, hey, everything we have belongs to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to honor him with that. And we will figure out how to pay off the debt. And that's exactly what we did. And I don't say that braggadociously because I think it's a discussion that every couple has to have, and you have to figure out your way forward. But honestly, if it had been me by myself, I probably would have continued down the road of, I don't have enough money to tithe, but I'll pay the bills, and whatever is left over, well, that's what I'll give.
Right. And striving like super hard.
Yes. But that change in the mindset, when Jay and I we made the decision, and it was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we've done. And it has been probably one of the most freeing decisions that we made as a couple. And I'm not sure we understood how freeing it would be in the beginning, but I can speak to 34 years of that has absolutely been one of the most poignant decisions we have made. And we don't look back with regret at all.
Right. Because when we understand that God owns it all, and then the car breaks down and it's a $900 repair bill, I always say, okay, I think the Lord must feel this mechanic and his business needs it more than we do. And here goes the 900. But the same is with paying off that debt. I mean, he can make things happen over here that you never imagined. And we look at it so like dollar in the bank account, dollar out. And God is just, he just wants our heart. He wants us to be holy. And he wants to say, do you understand that I own it all anyways? Because if you do, I'll take over. And I think that's the beauty of when we do put him first with our finances. And some people, when they say tithe, it's 10% from gross, 10% from net. And that's not the purpose of the podcast to define tithe, but it's your, finances before the Lord, and that percentage that you are giving to him first above all else, to show that really you understand that he's given it to you to steward, and everything you have is from him. Yep. And he owns it all.
Absolutely. The faith journey is huge, and the trust. And I have experienced this on every level. If my husband were sitting here with me for this podcast, he would happily tell you about me being responsible for this nonprofit, which I gave lip service to. I know this is not mine. I know it belongs to the Lord. Yeah. But in the middle of the night, when you wake up and you have broken out in a cold sweat and you sit straight up in bed realizing I don't have enough money for payroll tomorrow, right, and then watching God work. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I was in that role for 23 years, and I can give you so many examples of how God, just brought the fruit. Yes. And so he has taught me, I am very type A. I am a planner. I am not spontaneous. And so he was teaching me, you're not in control, darling. You're not in control. Right. And so it has been a journey for me, both personally and professionally.
Yes.
And I'm still on that journey. He has taught me a lot about his faithfulness and what it means to be a child of the King and to trust him.
No, that's beautiful. And I do feel that, when you talk to an 18-year-old who has seen God's faithfulness, that's beautiful. But then the older you get and you can look back upon the various seasons, decades,
Yeah,
it almost gives you the chills of his
definitely
faithfulness
does.
and realizing, why do we stress? Why do we worry? And because look what he's done in the past, like no human could ever knit those details together. And same going forward, like he has it.
Yeah, and I think that's why I know we're not meant to do life alone. You're not meant to be in isolation in your marriage. You're not meant to be in isolation as a woman in the workplace. And when I struggled with the worry, I had women in my life who were saying, look at the history, Julie.
Mhm.
Don't forget how God has been faithful through the decades. And so that was helpful for me. And
Yeah.
I in turn am turning around and being helpful to those coming along, behind me and
Right.
saying, let's look at history here.
Mhm.
And what has God done and how has he shown himself faithful through the hard times, through the great times, through challenges? He has been very faithful.
That's very well said. How do you take that knowledge in your role at Windshape and try to infuse that within the various marriage retreats that you plan? Because I know you have a variety. You have like couples who are engaged, and then you have couples that might have special needs children, or you have people that are now in the empty nesting season. So do you have a variety of principles that you're trying to, sew into each of the sessions, or how do you look at that from a strategy side of things?
I would definitely say reminding people of the oneness. Like this relationship is so vital to any relationship that's like this.
Mm-hmm.
With your spouse or with other people in your world, if this right here isn't intentional and you're not paying attention to what is God calling me to, how am I using my giftedness to glorify him? I can't think of a single retreat that we offer where we're not speaking to that in some way, shape, or form. And when I think about generosity, I can remember actually taking uh, the team at the other nonprofit that I ran. I took them through a journey of generosity jog,
Right.
and
Yeah.
wow, that that was, I think, transformational. And so carrying that forward to my time here at Windshape, especially with couples who are preparing for marriage, it is a really fun conversation to be able to think through. One mindset is, well, we don't have enough. When we have an emergency fund, when we have this, when we have that, then we'll tithe
Right.
versus making that a priority on the front end and why that would actually matter doing that together,
Mm-hmm.
which generates some really fun conversation around how you might do that.
Excellent. And of course, as we all know, finances can be a very
Oh,
strong, sticking point in a marriage. How people were raised, the abundance, scarcity mindset. Yes.
mhm.
One other piece for the listener who maybe is even considering attending one of these marriage retreats that I'd love for you to talk about is the experiential side, because not only do you take the head knowledge, help people understand the vertical, in case they're listening, not seeing the video of us, the vertical relationship with God, the
Right.
horizontal with the people around us, but
Yeah.
explain how fun it is, the different experiential exercises that you do during Windshape
So
retreat.
our goal has been that every retreat has experiential as a component of it. So for example, when we are talking about money, we have a really fun card game that a friend of mine developed called Money Habitudes. The reason people struggle so much with money is they come to marriage with an attitude about money,
Yep.
and so does the person they're marrying.
Right.
But a lot of times you don't talk about, well, what does money mean to you? What did you learn about money growing up?
It's a
Some
good
people,
chat.
yeah, well, and some people learned that you make money to give it away. That's the purpose of having money, is that if somebody's in need, we're going to give them what they need. Others, they grew up with nothing. And so to have money means security and safety. And they don't ever want to feel out of control, like, oh my goodness, I don't know where our next meal is coming from, because they've lived that and that does not feel good.
Right.
So money habitudes actually allows them in a very easy way to figure out, oh, this is what I think about money. And then to have a conversation comparing what they each think about it, to then be able to move forward in a discussion of, well, how do we want to think about it? What matters to us? What are our priorities? And even if they don't get on the same page immediately, information is helpful. It's powerful to understand, oh, that's where you're coming from. That's why this is so important to you, versus that is just the dumbest thing. And I do not understand why you think that way, which is how people get into the arguments that they get into. So, appreciating the differences.
Yes, and so much of the challenge in marriage is each person comes into the marriage with a different sense of, quote, normal, and what, how they were raised thinking, well, no, but this is supposed to be how it is, and the other person's like, no, this is, what do you mean? You don't wash the car every Saturday morning. No, we always took it to a car wash when the car got, all those kinds of things where, and God just so uses it to make us more like him, more flexible, more open, and then to use that spouse's gifting to complement us and to shape this new, beautiful, unit that's never existed before. And we are creating something new. So, okay, that reminds me of, with you and Jay and your giving, are you aligned in your giving in terms of what you like to give toward with causes, or do you feel like you come at it from different perspectives, or what would you like to share about that?
I would say that we're really aligned. I was just thinking about, we've done a number of different things, but I think we're very aligned on the types of things that we want to give to. Family strengthening has been a big piece of that. And so looking for opportunities to bless organizations that are pouring into marriages, pouring into families, encouraging father involvement in the lives of their children, walking alongside those types of organizations, as well as our church, have been, I think, the majority of what we've done. And I can't think of a time when we weren't aligned on what we wanted to give to. So
I like the way you shared that categorically. It's beside your church. It's like most of those causes that you give to or charities that you give to have the similar category, of family. And that's neat for the listener who maybe feels a little spread thin in her giving, that maybe, wow, no, if the person, puts the umbrella over really what their heart is passionate about and is aligned with the spouse, that's a neat way to approach it. And in terms of the legacy you're leaving, just think of, the various dollars you've invested over the years to those various organizations and the impact on families.
Well, and we're both children of divorce.
Okay.
So it is a life journey for both of us.
Yes.
That if we could help people to understand how to be equipped, what you need to do married well, that's a legacy to help others do that, and know that just because you are a child of divorce, both of us, I mean, gosh, I live in the marriage and family world, and I still wonder, do I have what it takes? My parents were married 24 and a half years, and don't think that at 24 and a half years, I wasn't going, okay, is everything good? Are we all right? Which, there was no indication we weren't, but it's just there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that was an area for us that we wanted to pour into other people.
I appreciate you sharing that, Julie. I think that really ministers to the person listening who was affected by a divorce. And,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it was parents, maybe it was grandparents, who knows? It's affecting obviously most every family in today's world to one
Yeah.
degree or another.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you also, just in terms of being in this role, and you said your daughter, Ashley's just turned 30. My oldest turns 30 tomorrow. So kind of same season of life. How have you navigated, being in this role, and not just your current role, but even in your, being the CEO of Family First those years while Ashley was younger? Any thoughts you'd like to share with the listeners of the balance, the seasonality, what you've learned? Because obviously some people are called to the workplace, some are called to fully at home, some are called to a blend of both. I always want to say in this podcast, there is no right way that every listener should feel like they have to do it, because every family unit varies and is different. And so it's very unique to whatever God is calling you on your own journey. But I do feel there's a lot we can learn from people who have
Yes.
walked down certain paths.
Yes. And I'll say in the 90s, in the early 90s, my husband he started getting very involved in Christian Businessmen's Committee. And I would say to him, why is there nothing for Christian working women? I need other women. I want to be with other women who are juggling like I'm juggling.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, we had no sooner had that conversation than I received a phone call at work. And at that time, I was at a counseling center doing counseling for marriages and families. I received a phone call from someone I did not know who said, God has really put it on my heart to try and start something for Christian working women.
Wow.
I was like, hello, Lord. So a group of us actually got together and we started Scenic City Women's Network to equip, encourage, and energize Christian working women, whether you were working out of your home or you were working part-time or you were working full-time. Everybody was welcome at the table.
Right.
And it was truly a way to walk with each other arm in arm and encourage each other through Bible study, monthly gatherings, and that sort of thing. So to your point, I had women walking with me.
Uh-huh.
I was really intentional. I told my husband, wouldn't it be just like the evil one that I would have the opportunity to be a part of an organization that is dedicated to strengthening marriages and families, and that I would neglect my own marriage and family because I thought everybody else's was more important.
Yeah.
And so that was one piece of accountability
Sure.
that we put into play, is that cannot be,
Right.
that there is nobody else's marriage or family that's more important than my own. That comes first.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've tried really hard. And there have been some seasons where I've been out of balance. But I think the thing is, if you establish where north is,
Mm-hmm.
if you and your spouse establish where north is, then when you're off, you're off, but you know you're going to get back because you know what you established as north.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about a compass, sometimes when you hold the compass, the needle does shake, but it always comes back to north.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's important. If you do not know what your priorities are as a couple and as a family, the world will tell you, or the evil one will whisper in your ear that all these other things are important.
Yeah.
So I think that would be what I would say, is that establish that. And then when you're off, you don't beat yourself up. You just go, we've gotten a little sideways here. We need to get back over here.
Excellent. And I think also going back to Windshape, that is the importance of taking a weekend and having time outside of the crazy busyness of life to reevaluate those things, because we get caught up in all the things that are clamoring for our attention. And like you said, I mean, how easy it is if we neglect the
the thing that's most important, everything else, is just going to be affected. But if we keep that, we know our north, and we know in our couples, seasonality, like maybe, my job's involving a lot of travel right now, or maybe my spouse's is, and it is, we're always trying to just kind of balance the teeter totter so that whatever season, the age the kids are, but it does require, I think, sort of stepping back and allowing time to do that when you're not exhausted and you're fresh, and maybe it's the morning on a weekend kind of thing, which is, again, the beauty of being in a beautiful retreat center.
If you go to Windshape Marriage on Instagram, we actually have a PDF that you can download, and it's visioning for your marriage. And we put that out not very long ago, having no earthly idea how many people would respond to that and say, oh my goodness, this is exactly what we needed. This was the framework we needed to help us figure out what is the vision for our marriage? What are our priorities? Where do we want to focus? Being able to say in this season of life, no to these things, which doesn't mean no forever. It just means no for now. And then as you move to a different season, you might be able to incorporate some of those other things in. And, part of being generous is actually knowing, hey, for this season, these are our priorities, and these are the things we want to focus on.
Definitely. And, similar to how you help people figure out their vision, their blueprint for their marriage, at NCF, we're helping people figure out their giving strategy, because many people work with a financial planner and they know about how much they're saving for retirement, et cetera. But they haven't taken the time to really figure out what we were talking about earlier. What are we passionate about together and individually? So that's lovely. Okay. What about, I know we're almost at time. 2 last topics. One is this whole season now of empty nesting. You and Jay, how are you finding that? Any learnings you would like to share with our listeners? And then I just always love to close with your favorite Bible verse, book that you're reading, and then any bargain that you've come across. Because most guests on this podcast love bargains.
Hey. Empty nesting. It is awesome. For the people who are not empty nesting, I would say to you, you are preparing for the empty nest right now.
Yeah.
So if you've put your marriage on the back burner and you think, oh, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I've been doing this work for 40 years. And I can tell you that in the 4 decades that I've been doing this, the people who struggle the most are the ones who say, well, when our last one is preparing to leave, then we'll start talking about the empty nest. Mm-hmm. And they are the ones that have experienced the most distress. Mm-hmm. For your children and for your marriage, the greatest gift that you could actually give everyone is to make sure that your marriage is a priority.
Yeah.
Because what you're teaching them is how to do married well, how to be healthy in your marriage relationship, and that they're not the center of your universe. Exactly. That the marriage comes first and then the children. So it's helpful all the way around. So I would say even if you have infants, you focus on, hey, we're preparing for the empty nest, because your children's job is to grow and go. Mm-hmm. If you want to provide an environment for them to thrive in which they can have the confidence and feel the support to be able to grow and go, you having a strong marriage is a huge piece, if not 100% of that. It's a very, very huge piece. Yes. So, and then when you get to it, it's like, oh, yeah, I remember before kids.
I remember falling in love with you before.
Yeah. So we're having a good time. We love it. It was, I won't lie. It was very quiet. Sure. For the first 3 weeks. I'm like, good grief. How does one additional person bring so much more energy and noise to the house? But then we did get into a routine. And I can remember Ashley's small group leader coming to me in December before she came home for Christmas break, after she had gone off to college. And she said, so are you excited about Ashley coming home? And I said, oh, yes, I cannot wait to see her. And she said, well, I'm going to tell you a secret. I said, what's that? And she leaned in and she said, as excited as you are to have her come home, you're going to be more excited when she leaves. And I just kind of looked at her quizzically, and she goes, I'll talk with you mid-January. And so I saw her the end of January at church, and she said, well, and I said, you were right. You were so right. And it's not that we don't love Ashley. It was just that we had gotten into our routine.
And so
And
had she,
yeah,
she's
so
no longer
had she.
living with you.
Right.
And
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I know. And as mother hens, it's like we'd love to keep all the chicks in the nest forever, but I don't think anyone raises them thinking they're going to be playing video games in the basement forever either.
You don't want that. You don't want failure to launch.
I know. Exactly. And if someone's listening and their kid's still, trying to figure it out, have patience. It will happen. It might be slower than, your neighbor, but it will happen. And
Right.
I agree. I mean, it's funny how really resilient human beings are and how quickly, even with me having the 4 kids, I remember the first would go away and then how quickly the second in line would become the oldest of the ones remaining, and then the 3 became, the 5 of us are this new unit. And then that one goes away to college. And you just adapt and change. And it's kind of how life is always, we're always adapting and changing. Nothing's ever static. And part of the joy of being flexible as a believer and realizing that we never know, each day what it will hold. And God asks us to just trust him and go with the journey and be flexible, right?
Yes.
So, okay, favorite Bible verse?
So Jeremiah 29:11 is absolutely my life verse. And the thing that I love about that is that these people were getting ready. They were in the throes of and moving into this long time of hardship. And he's like, hey, I have plans to prosper you, not to harm you, but you're going to have to be patient in the journey. I know the plans I have for you. And so I think that just being open-handed to not telling God your agenda, but asking the Lord, what is it that you have called me to? With the giftedness and the passions that you've given to me, what have you called me to? And I can remember thinking early on, I have a special needs brother. I thought I was going to be working with families with special needs, children, and that would be my career. And then my parents divorced, and it was abundantly clear to me that would be my life's work. And so I think being open-handed and knowing that he has a plan for all of us and a purpose, and keeping our eyes wide open to see where he's at work and joining him in his work.
And as we'll talk about, our pain can become our platform too. What we experienced and how we navigated through it with God's help, and we now have a heart to want to help others. Yep. Okay, a book you're reading, I believe I remember Henry Cloud.
Henry Cloud. So I'll tell you 2 books, actually. One is Resilient by John Eldredge, which was very helpful coming out of COVID. I think people felt like 2022, goodness, we should be over it. But that was a very traumatic experience for everyone. I don't care how you felt about it. It's traumatic. So that was helpful. And this is the one I'm reading right now. It's brand new. Trust by Dr. Henry Cloud. And it's applicable for work and home. And I'm thoroughly enjoying it. So
I've read Resilient, but I haven't gotten a copy of Trust. So that I'm adding that to my list.
Highly recommend.
Okay, definitely. Yeah. And any recent bargains you've come across?
Gosh, I'm trying to think about where I've come across recent bargains. I'm not really a shopper. So.
Okay, if you don't have one, I actually have one that I came across.
Great. Yeah.
And for anybody who likes Lululemon, which we all know it's expensive, I figured out that at the outlets, like when you walk into a Lululemon store, they have these clearance racks for men and for women. So I'll usually gravitate to those. But let's just say it's marked down to $45 kind of for the shorts. If you can go to an outlet, now some of these outlets will ship to you. I'm not sure about, I've known that for other brands. So I don't know if Lulu would do this. So maybe you might have to live close by one of them, but they had this promotion where if you buy, one item, you're going to get an additional 5%, 10%. And so if you bought 4 items, including like a $3.99 scrunchie for your hair, you got 25% off the $45 that you would find in the store. So, yeah. So the takeaway is if you have an outlet near you, check it out. Maybe there will be an additional savings for you.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes. Well, Julie, it's always just such a privilege to get to spend time with you. And I think you're just such a wealth of knowledge and wisdom and encouragement. And I love how you've used what God allowed in your life to just really bless and help so many people and continue to help so many marriages in your current role. So thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for taking the time. God bless. And look forward to catching up again.
Thank you. That sounds great.
Okay. Thank you again.
Thanks so much for joining us today on the Generous Girl podcast. We're so glad that you're here. And if you know of someone that you think needs to be a guest on this podcast, please reach out to us. New episodes are released every other week, and you can follow us on YouTube and on all platforms. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.